Hi, today I'm going to show you how to paint tree foliage, and we're going to be trying to create the feeling of volume and light by mixing several shades of green and applying them in several layers from dark up to light. I'm using system-free acrylics and I'm mixing all my own greens from blues and yellows. I've already prepared a canvas here and I've just created a background using these colours, and I've painted the tree taking care to show where the light's coming from, which is mainly from the front. Using system-free brushes, I've just got 3 brushes here, and I've got 2 separate palettes. One palette which I suggest to beginners you have a separate palette for your pure colour, and I've got a palette here to mix my colours, and the reason for that is so that when I mix my colours they stay really clean and they don't get mixed up with my pure colours. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is block in the base tone. I'm going to put in the really dark shadow. Now, if we want to create volume in a tree, we've got to think about where the light's coming from. So light's coming from the front, so I'm going to block in the base shape with a really dark green to show where the shadow is and the weight of the underneath of the tree. So if I mix my first colour, my dark green, I need some phthalo blue. So I'll scoop some of that onto my palette. I'm then going to mix into that a little bit of the lemon yellow, so we get a really lovely rich green. And I'm going to darken that down by adding some burnt umber. So that is going to be my really lovely dark green. And I'm going to paint this with quite bold brush strokes, so I'm just going to go for it and not worry too much about it being neat. So I coat my brush, there's not any water or anything on the brush, I'm just going straight in. There's quite a lot of moisture in these system-free paints. And I'm just going to use a slightly zigzag brush stroke and slightly sweep my hand, so I'm beginning to get a shape of where the dark shapes are. So if I bring this round, it's like the underbelly of the tree, so we're going to sweep it round in a nice little curve. Okay, and we're going to have some of it coming up into the centre. So if you imagine this is like the base of the tree, the dark bits where the sun isn't quite getting into. And of course we're going to build this up in a couple of layers, so some of this will be hidden. Okay, I am now going to switch to a slightly smaller brush. It's around number 4, because I want to suggest some of the individual leaves which are silhouetted against the background. So just at this bottom edge here, we take the same colour, and this is where I'm going to just use separate little brush strokes which I'm going to just angle, just to suggest some little leaves just coming down, just sitting in front of those background trees. Okay, and we'll have a couple of little leaves just silhouetting on the top edge. Bring that down. Okay, and maybe have a few. See, I'm just using alternate angled little brush strokes. Right, I'm now going to have a go at mixing the next tone. I'm just going to paint that straight on top of this, and we should get a nice, quite a subtle layer of green going on top. So let's just clean my brush off. I usually dry my brush off after washing it. You don't actually need too much moisture with these paints, and I get really rich colour by not diluting them. Okay, the next mix, we're just going to add a little bit more lemon yellow to my first colour, so just bringing up the green slightly lighter. So a bit more lemon yellow into that existing mix. Right, and I'm just going to do a similar kind of brush stroke, and I'm just going to slightly overlap where I began. So hopefully you'll see you're already beginning to get some depth where you've got different tones going on, different shades of green. Okay, so I just slightly overlap on the top edge. Actually, a little bit more yellow in there. I just want it a little bit of contrast from the first colour. Okay, so there we are, nice lighter green. Same kind of brush strokes. And let's have some light coming in from the top. Bringing the edges of the tree out now from the centre. I quite like using this big brush because I can actually use the side of it to get nice little spiky marks, or I can use the whole of it for broader marks. I'm not too worried about any details. This is quite an impressionist way of working, and I can bring in the details on my last layer. Okay, I am going to leave that to dry for a few minutes just before I mix my brighter, lighter greens just to sit on top. If I leave this to dry, then when I put my next brush strokes down, the colours will be really crisp and clear. So we'll leave that for a few moments. Okay, now that's dry enough for me to continue, so I'm going to mix up my next set of colours, and this is where it starts to get exciting. So we've got quite a dark base there, and we need to really bring it to life with some bright colours to show the sunshine which will be coming in from this side. And so we're going to go for some really lovely sunshine yellows. I'm going to go for my cadmium yellow, which is a nice warm yellow. I'm going to mix that with a little bit of cerulean blue, and we'll get a really quite a bright green here. Now, one of my tips for mixing greens is you can cool them down a little bit, calm them down if they're a bit too garish. You can add a little touch of a red just to bring them down, or even a touch of burnt umber. I've got some umber today. So I'm just going to put a little touch of that in just to calm it down a little bit. So we've got a really lovely rich green. Add a little touch of white just to cool it down a bit. Now this is going to be my first colour for my light, and the light's coming in this way, so I need to have the lighter green around here and maybe on the edges where the tree catches, the light just hits the top. Okay, so let's load the brush and let's try and bring some light onto that. So just light little touches. I don't want to overdo it, and actually this style of impressionist painting, you almost have to kind of sit back and just look at it through half closed eyes sometimes, just to get an impression literally of what you're trying to show without too much detail. Okay, let's go a bit more blue. I'm just going to slightly darker. Okay, so I'm literally just angling my brush and just kind of dabbing the colour on just where I need it. Let's bring some of that down the centre, because the centre is going to be catching on the front side. The light is going to be hitting it. This is where I can switch to a smaller brush as well, so I can slightly vary my brush strokes. So we can have slightly more exaggerated, or we can have smaller brush strokes. Okay, let's get some lighter greens through the centre here and on the edges. Some marks are going to be bigger, and some marks I can do smaller, so I'm varying it slightly. Okay. Right, okay, I'm going to use my little tiny brush just to start to bring in some lighter leaves on the edges. Okay, if I just add a little bit more white to the mix, we can go up a bit lighter still, a bit more yellow. So now I'm really bringing the sunshine in. I'm going to just concentrate that on this edge, because that's where the light's really hitting it. Possibly a bit too bright. Bring a bit more blue in. Some more here. Right, my last thing is going to be just putting on some pure yellow and white, so the last highlight, as it were. Let's mix some of that together. Okay, let's add a little bit of that green. So it's almost a pure yellow. And that's just going to be in just the edges, just where it's catching the sunlight just on the edge there. Let me just sum through here. Okay, and the last thing I need to do to give this a bit more depth to it is just to bring the sky back through in some of the gaps. So I'm going to leave that to dry off for a moment, then I'm going to paint with a sky colour back in the gaps just to suggest the breaking of the light shining through it. So I need to leave that again for a couple of minutes just to dry. Okay, now that's dry, we're ready to put the sky back in. As it's acrylic, we can paint on top of dark paint and the colour will still show. So I'm just going to mix a little bit of the white with some of my cerulean blue to try and match that existing sky colour that I had. And we're going to just start to place that in quite loosely, just to suggest little breaks in the tree. So I'm going to go for this number 8 brush. And what I need to think about with this is maybe placing my brush at different angles, because we need to create a natural impression. So I'm just going to start to paint in those gaps where we would like to see some of the sky shining through. So alternating the brush so it looks more natural. You can have some smaller marks and some larger marks. And acrylic's great like this because it's really versatile. It allows you to adapt and change things. You don't have to have it all precisely planned right from the beginning. If you want to just change things a little bit or just rearrange them, you can. So it's quite forgiving. It's great fun. Okay, a bit more light here. I'm almost done. Maybe we'll have just clean up that shape there. There. Okay, so I think I'm finished. And here you can see where I've used this technique and I've applied it on a bigger, looser style painting, which I painted actually in the New Forest. And you can see how it creates quite an exciting and loose kind of style. Hope you found my tips useful, and happy painting.